So without any further ado, the President of the Bank of America for California, Janet Lamkin.
Thank you, Jim. Well, this year the Outlook Conference theme obviously is Think Big, and we have a lot of great thinkers for you today, including what we just heard. But right now, it's my privilege to introduce to you a truly big thinker, Governor Jerry Brown. But Governor Jerry Brown is also a doer. Among the many accomplishments of his tenure so far is he has taken a bold and disciplined approach to producing a balanced state budget and starting to pay down our debt. He's working to correct the growing inequality of funding in state schools, and he's continuing to leverage California's environmental leadership to address global climate change so that it's both economically and environmentally sustainable. Governor Brown has been very fully engaged in all of the top issues that are of importance to the business community and the Bay Area Council, including CEQA reform, pension reform, higher education, and infrastructure. And he's also moved us into the new century on international trade. In April, Governor Brown led a group of 100 CEOs to China and opened up the first California-China office in decades, and I had the privilege of attending that trip with him and observing him, and we'll talk a little bit about that today. But please, ladies and gentlemen, join me in welcoming Governor Jerry Brown. Well, Governor Brown, we were listening in the back, and that was a really great panel, and I'm so glad they warmed them up. But based on the governor's speech in Sacramento yesterday, you haven't seen anything yet. So, Governor, so let's start with China a little bit. I will tell you that it was a very rigorous schedule. The governor was up from dawn till dusk, and in many of his remarks and comments and introductions, he referenced Chinese philosophers, which really charmed our hosts and really engaged him, which I thought was brilliant. So I'm interested in what your impressions are of China, and what was one of your biggest surprises of being over there now?
Well, the most dominant impression is the zest, the energy, the cranes, the building, looking out the hotel room at 11 o'clock at night. Workmen are on the cranes, and the buildings, the scaffold. So it's a country in motion, dynamic. They have certainly plenty of turbulence, but they have enough of a purpose and a coherence. They build an incredible way. And I took the high-speed rail, of which they have 5,000 miles. Here, people are fighting over an inch or a mile. They thought, oh my God, what if we had a little bit of high-speed rail? It's kind of like some kind of a virus. And there is this kind of fear of building, fear of the future, let's hunker down in the status quo, back into the womb of our own, miasma and misconceptions. That's not my plan, by the way. But I have a lot of opponents who live in that imaginary. That's another word I've picked up recently. It's when you kind of create a whole bunch of space for your mind, and it's quite different from the rest. In any event, China was exciting. I looked at the high-speed rail that I started to say. I look out the right, you see all these tall buildings. They look like downtown Los Angeles. Then I looked out the other side, far in the distance. There's another Los Angeles. Then you go a couple of minutes, there's another one, and then another one. I mean, it's 15, 20 buildings. Really looked like downtown. So my reaction is power. Lots of power, lots of human energy. And we're in the Pacific. They're our partner. They were very receptive, a lot of interchange. The business people felt like they were making progress. Lots of tourists, money that I think can come our way. I think with the visa changes that we can get out of the immigration reform bill, we'll get more Chinese scholars and researchers, and a certain amount will stay. So I think we have a very powerful potential relationship. I would just say, after looking at all that power, we better have a good relationship. I wouldn't want to get into beef with them.
We spend a lot of our time in China on climate change, and obviously you're a leader in this country and really worldwide on that issue, and had a lot of great discussions. Where do you see a partnership between China and California on climate change issues?
With Guangdong province and maybe some other places, some of the sub-national units. California is in the forefront. No other place, I don't think, in the Western Hemisphere is doing as much. Building efficiency, renewable energy, the beginnings of a cap-and-trade program. Quebec is potentially our partner in this effort, but I'd like to see other states and other provinces in China. China obviously is very much dependent on coal, self-inflicted, I might say. If you try to breathe the air in Beijing, pretty impossible. It was okay when we were there, but they tell me it's, you can't see across the street. So I think China has problems. They have capabilities. I think they can get there. Already a world leader in renewable energy. So I think there's a lot of partnership. I think they're open to it. And just as they are seeing the very tall hill of getting off fossil fuel, so does this country. And so does a lot of other countries. So I think working with the provinces in China that want to work with us, I think we can advance the work of turning our industrial economies away from fossil fuel and onto a renewable path.
Did you sense a will from them and a desire to do that and to really make the changes necessary?
Well, it'd be hard. First of all, their whole country bespeaks will. Right. If there's intellect and will, I saw a lot of willpower. And I'm very impressed with will, because sometimes you have ideas, but then operationalizing those ideas in the face of complexity and obstacles is something. So I think they got a lot of will. And where they want to go, I think I'm also impressed with their intelligence and the intellect and just the human energy, the buzz. So I'm really excited about our potential trade and tourism and exchange of scholars and research and business, all of that. Now, I don't know what all their issues are. I've read where there's trillions of dollars of debt on their local government books, lots of issues there. So they're not immune to bubbles. So we'll just have to be aware of that. But I think being on the Pacific Rim is certainly one of our major assets. If gold got California going in this modernizing, innovative economy, in 1848 and 1849. Certainly the Pacific Rim has that energy potential in terms of stimulating economic and cultural change and all the other things. So I think the China relationship is really key.
Bringing it back now stateside, you recently put out your May revision of the budget and talked a lot about local funding control formula. And with a lot of discussion, the Bay Area Council recently recommended an endorsement of your educational reforms. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, very simply, I'll try to be very simple. The education funding in California is basically a base grant that's derived from a couple of different sources. But that base grant is then supplemented by something called categorical programs. There are about 60 of them. And those programs have their own rules, their own funding requirements, and they trigger their own audit responses. And they engender certain private consulting groups that teach the myriad school districts how to exploit the various funding streams and their requirements. You might say they teach them how to game the system. That teaching triggers a lot of non-teaching work, a lot of administration, a lot of doing stuff not in the classroom. So I want to sweep as much of that as I can out. Now, every categorical program has, a mother and a father and a cousin and an army and maybe a union or two and parents and deeply felt emotions. So it's not easy to get rid of them. But we're making very good progress. I met with the Speaker and Senate Pro Tem, and while we're not closing the gap yet, I think the principle is powerful. I think they're for it, various degrees of enthusiasm. So what the point is, take away those categoricals. What were they trying to do? They're trying to deal with problems of poverty, language, special ed, transportation, career ed, all these different, every time you got an idea, somebody creates a categorical program, and that's more people outside the classroom. So we want to eliminate that and take it down to 3 factors. How many poor kids, as measured by the eligibility for a hot lunch, are in the school district? How many have families who don't speak English at home? And how many are foster kids? That's the formula. Just add up the number of those kids, and they get a certain percentage of money. How much is that? 18 cents on every dollar. 80 cents of every dollar just goes to people, the base grant, they all get it. 16 cents will go on this supplemental per capita, or per individual with these needs. And the other 4 cents we held back to go to districts that have more than 50% of kids in this category. By the way, we're not talking about a few kids. 3 million kids are below the poverty line out of 6 million, and 2 million don't speak English at home, and that has implications. So, yeah, if you grew up in a pretty nice house, everybody's speaking English, middle class, pretty well orderly, nobody's getting shot, mother doesn't have to work 2 jobs, life is different. And so we want to equalize that by where they're impacted districts, where there are kids who have challenges. Let's give them a little more money. It's only a smaller, 20 cents on the dollar, and this 4% would go to districts that have 50, 55, 60%. And you don't give all the 4 cents, you just give, if you have 52%, you get 2% of the 4%. If you have 60%, you get 10% of this 4%. And who's it going to go to? Oakland, San Francisco, LA, Compton, districts that are tough. And I say to some of these people, hey, you like it over there in Fairfax? You want to come down and send your kid in East Oakland? And no. So at least send some of the money down so we have a fighting chance. And going forward, if we don't lift the kids more effectively, that's bad for those kids, so it's not just, but it's also bad for all of us, because of the 6 million kids, 3 million are poor. 3 million are not living in Forest Hill or Pacific Heights or Piedmont, or Marin County. So we better get with it. This is really a moral and a political imperative, and that's why I'm confident we're going to get it. And thanks for endorsing it. It counts a lot, because business is a very important factor in the equation.
Governor, so the fund, it sounds like this will solve a lot of the funding issues around education with more money.
They're going to get more money, and a lot more money. I mean, it's going to be $17 billion over the next 4 or 5, 6 years, whatever it is. The money's coming in, and it will go to schools, because we have this proposition called 98. There are a lot of people, and I'm sure there are people in this audience, that are school reformers. And the school reform is a whole new agenda. After hundreds of years of education reform, I like to say going back to Comenius, who restructured the Norwegian school system, I might tell you. Now, how do I know that? Yes. I saw his name in a book 10 years ago, and I looked him up in Google recently to make sure I was on the right track. So anyway, from Comenius, he was some kind of bishop or something. He was a cleric of sorts. Anyway, until yesterday, people have been coming up with different ideas how to get kids to read, to count, to think, to get engaged. My skepticism is, when did we come up with teacher quality? The teacher is the most important thing, quality. They didn't think of that 20 years ago. Mike Kirst was the president of the school board for 8 years. Yesterday I said, Mike, you never mention teacher quality. You mentioned aid to the disadvantaged. You mentioned school site governance. You mentioned a few other things. So my point is that every 10 years, we get a new idea. And everybody gets excited, and we forgot the last one. But you gotta remember, I've been around for a while. I've been excited more than once. And so let 1,000 flowers bloom. We have charter schools. We have different school districts that are more or less enthusiastic. We have CTA that doesn't, sees it one way. And so a lot of things. So I put my faith in the teacher, in the classroom, in the principal, in the local school board. But because we're giving them a lot of discretion, they don't have all these categoricals, there will be a report card accountability, and if we see people screwing up, we will have the tools to intervene. And we're going to give the county superintendent, which I would venture to say nobody even knows we have a county superintendent, but we do in all 58 counties, and they will then be the first line of offense to get in there, make sure that people are acting. But the point I want to make, and it's why I come up with the idea of subsidiarity, move responsibility to where, as close to the problem, where it can be solved. The state has a state board, I don't know, 10 or 11 members. So few, I can hardly remember how many there are. But that's all. And we have about 8 or 9 or 10 employees. What can we do? Now, the state superintendent has hundreds of people, but most of them are just processing federal grants. So the capacity of a limited group of people to affect the behavior of 330,000 teachers and 6 million kids is highly limited. All the state can do is send out a message. At the end of the day, it's paper, or now it's emails, or it's in the 13 volumes of the state education code. But it's in the classroom. It's the enthusiasm. It's the lesson plan. It's the preparation. It's the collegiality of the teachers. It's what kind of a principal. Is the school board responsive? If none of that is working, and you want some new laws and a few more directives, a few minute prescriptions sent over the internet, what if they don't do it? First of all, how do we know if they did it? Well, we've got to get it in the computer, and somebody's got to read it, then somebody's got to tell somebody, then we've got to debate it, and then we've got to do it, then we send some other message down. So what I'm saying is, I think it's a very important part about scale. Where are you handling the problem? Sitting in my office, in the legislature, very limited. Most of the work, for good or bad, starts with mommy and daddy. Then the kid himself, the kid has to learn. Because education is not a noun. It's an intransitive verb. I learn. You may have a right to education, but you have a duty to learn. If you don't exercise your best efforts, you ain't going to learn nothing, to put it in the vernacular. You are not going to learn anything, substantively or positive. Somebody said my grammar was bad because I said, my wife, I'm doing so good because my wife manages me. Well, someone says, how you doing? I say, I'm doing good. I don't say I'm doing well. And you check the usage. I think my usage has now trumped the grammar books. Not my usage, usage by people in general, because I listen. I say, how are you? And then I don't hear anybody say I'm well. We think they're well, you didn't tell me, were you sick? No, good means, things are going good. Now, grammatically, by the book, they're going well. Adverbs modify verbs, adjectives modify nouns. St. Brendan's, 1951.
Well,
Diagram sentences, too. By the way, they never had any evaluation of these teachers, no performance, no computers. You had a little report card. Father Ryan used to stand there and give it to us. Had to go to the front of the classroom, that was it. Get it signed. Simpler life, no records, no one knows. I could be lying to you, because there are no records. And that's the way, those are the golden years. Now, everything from preschool to you're dead is in the computer.
Governor, I think you fill such a niche in this state and in the political arena of really theory and practice, and very practical about your solutions. You don't just want to give money, you want to give money in reform, and you talk about it obviously in great detail and very comprehensively. And you recently gave a commencement speech at UC Berkeley where you talked about political theory and political practice. Can you just, it was fascinating. Can you just expand on that a little bit and how you're bringing that to life in the world today?
Well, I said political theory is more coherent than political practice. It's easier. You theorize. Those professors, they read about Hobbes and Locke and Marx and Plato. It's interesting. And, you probably haven't read much of that. Well, you should, because we want to get perspective. How bad is it? Or how good is it? Where are we? And I think you read the theories and how life is. And I quoted my political science professor. I took one political science class, political theory class, Professor Woolen. He wrote a book in 1970. In the introduction, he said, America's in a crisis. And it's a crisis that we're increasingly incapable of managing our people, in effect, and increasingly destructive in how we relate to the environment. That was 1970. So a lot of the ivory tower theorists are thinking ideas that are going to have practical application. And what I enjoy, maybe more than anything else, is having an idea and then see it operationalized and as it's transformed through the legislative, political, media process. So I pick these things up, go through my mind, I think about them, and then we try to make something happen. Kids who are poor ought to have more opportunity than kids who have more enriched backgrounds. So then how do we make that happen? Well, we got to talk to the Senate, talk to the Assembly, and there's a lot of to and fro. And we don't get it overnight. So you got to have patience. You have to have patience. So that's what I really said when I ended my little commencement. By the way, it's the first commencement speech I've ever written in my whole life. So it's I'm doing a lot of firsts this third term around. But I ended with calling everybody's attention to our bear flag and to the grizzly bear that is there portrayed. Now, unfortunately, the grizzly bear is extinct. So that's a little ominous. But the grizzly bear is fierce, courageous, and determined. So go Bears.
Well, on that note, Governor, I think on behalf of all of us, we want to thank you for your vision, for your leadership, for your commitment to the state of California, for your effectiveness, and yeah, go Bears.
Okay.
Thank you, Governor.
Thank you.